Welcome to Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the untold stories and experiences surrounding abortion. Stories often missing from everyday conversations, media reports, and even other podcast interviews. I'm your host, Melissa Ohden, the founder and CEO of the Abortion Survivors Network. As the author of You Carried Me, A Daughter's Memoir, and Abortion Survivors Break Their Silence, I've had the privilege of hearing the most powerful stories from some of the most resilient and courageous individuals. These stories and these people have profoundly transformed my life, and I believe they have the power to transform yours as well. Together, we will amplify these voices, share the truths that they illuminate, and challenge our culture to recognize what life is truly like beyond abortion. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Life Beyond Abortion, the podcast where we delve into the stories, the experiences, the voices of those who can help us understand beyond the predominant narrative about abortion in our culture. And every guest, as you know, is very different in terms of their personal and professional experiences. And today's guest is a real treat, to be honest. Someone who I have a friendship with, someone who I admire, and someone who I know is going to really, I think, expand your understanding of the impact of abortion and really how we heal all who are impacted by it. So today I welcome my friend and a colleague for life, Priscilla Hurley. Thank you for joining me today, Priscilla.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's always a pleasure to see your joyous face. And, you know, I know we have so much to talk about. And, you know, I have the distinct honor of knowing you and your experiences and who you are as a person. And I just kind of want us to start there. You know, there's a lot that we bring to the table if we share our stories publicly in the pro-life movement. And I think, you know, Priscilla, sometimes our stories are a little bit unexpected, right? They don't even fit what people in the pro-life movement understand about abortion and its impact. So I really just want to kick it to you and say, man, tell us who you are. What's your story? How is Priscilla
Mm.
Priscilla?
Well, thank you for that. You know how it is. Where do I land on this story of mine? Um, I want to start with, the reality of being having my identity really immersed in the abortion advocacy narrative for the first 30 years of my life. And as you know, that started with being a survivor of an attempted abortion on my life. My twin wasn't wasn't saved, but I was, and I think that reality, and we know this, the trauma of that experience affected me very deeply in my sense of who I am. And we know abortion is a death culture. It robs, it's a thief, it lie. I mean, all of those things. And I think because of the death culture around it, there's that imprint almost with survivors of abortion who can't manage the value that they bring to the world. And I was raised by that woman who made that decision. And, so there was a real need in my life that was not filled as a child. So,
That hole,
yeah.
right? That hole within
Yes.
ourselves that
Hmm.
is often nameless for a long time. You know,
Yeah.
I think one of the things I will always distinctly remember about you and your experience is looking at a childhood photo of you and this almost shocked, but at the same time a very blank, right? A blank, flat affect. And
Hmm.
so let's unpack that a little bit for folks who
Yeah.
don't know your experience. You survived the attempt to abort you that ended the life of your twin, and you were raised by your mother who attempted it. But all of this
Mhm.
happened before Roe versus Wade. So, can you give
Yeah.
us a little bit about, the circumstances your mom was going through?
Yes, of course. My mom and as a pro-life person now, I have compassion on those circumstances. She was widowed when she was pregnant with me. She had four children already, and her husband was the light of her life. So that was devastating. And the grief, I think, just and the fear of a future, an unknown future, put her in a very vulnerable position. And I don't know, I kind of think there might have been people in her world that were advising and influencing her, but she went, we believe she went down to Mexico. We lived in Torrance. My dad was an experimental test pilot, so it was a very risky business. And he crashed in the Pacific Ocean with plane, in a plane that actually it fell apart while they were flying it. So there was just no way they could survive that. So she went, we think, to San Diego to visit friends and then across the border to Mexico. And a DNC, dilation and curettage for clinical people, um, was performed, was apparently successful. They assumed it was a twin, although again, Melissa, there were no medical records to confirm this, just verbal history from my mother. Um, so uh the miracle of my life wasn't real wasn't realized until years later when I came to surrender my life to Jesus Christ and connected with God and the love that he truly had for me and just his saving grace over the years that kept me alive basically. So there is hope in that.
There is,
uh,
and it's, I appreciate your vulnerability and your authenticity. I mean, that's who you are in a nutshell. If people don't know you, like you are who you are, just like I am who I am. And at the heart of it, there is always a bit of grief, right? The miracle of our lives is intermingled with pain, not
yes.
just our own pain, but the pain of our families and what they experienced before the abortion, what they experienced during it, and then what they even experienced after. And I think that's one of those
Mhm.
things when people want to dismiss us or try to silence and shame us, right? They're dismissing our suffering and the suffering of our families, something that you know very well.
Right, right. Yes. I felt very, isolated, and many survivors go through this where they don't really feel like they're part of even a family that they belong to. So it's a really strange thing to carry that burden through childhood, without anybody really helping you understand what it is. And then the story continues as I go to college and start acting out my sexuality because boys were attracted to me. I felt validated, the affection and the love, quote unquote, which really wasn't love, but that's a part of that world of deception that we have. And when you're connected and identified with this abortion experience, when I was 19, I got pregnant, that part of my story. And that was such a turning point too for me because I didn't know what to do. And in calling my mom, she came up and decided that they were good. My dad and her, she remarried a year after I was born, that they were going to arrange an abortion. And I mean, I complied. I can't, I didn't fight for my child. I didn't fight for myself because I didn't feel like I had a voice at that young age. And so that consequence was so devastating because I really did love the father of that child and he loved me, but the relationship ended after that. And so, spiral downwards. Again, I think abortion is such a thief, you know. It's just, it robs us of joy, of any dream that we might have, you know. And I think people that are really honest about it would, you know, take stock in how their life has gone. I'm so grateful that I had a second chance at life. But I just feel for people that haven't gotten there yet, that they're on this painful journey to find truth. So my mom did tell me about her attempt to abort me after I had my abortion at 19. So that was a shocking moment in my life. It was about, oh, I don't know, 4 or 5 months after I had my abortion. And she decided she was safe to tell me her secret, but she kept her secret for years. She didn't even tell her husband. So I did, you know, you're a clinical psychologist or social worker, so you know that that information in my mind at that moment in life set me free in a way, because I felt like, oh, okay, now I understand why I've always felt unwanted and that it was hard for her to love me. So it was helpful in that regard, but it was not talked about at all until many years later. I didn't ask her questions. I just kind of took that information. Didn't really affect my life at the moment, but
Well, and because we can't let it, right? Sometimes of like, yeah, I can't take that box off the shelf. I know that it's there, but I've got to try to keep on keeping on with my life. Or sometimes, you know, a lot of family members or even adoptive parents will tell the survivor and then say, and we're not going to talk about that anymore, which, right, reinforces those problems with identity and shame that we have as survivors of
Mhm.
like, oh, yeah, I mean, you're right. I clearly there is something wrong with me if you're going to tell me this and then tell me we're not going to talk about it again.
Yeah,
Of course, we know that it's their
right.
own shame and guilt, but obviously it comes out sideways. You know, one of the things I don't know if I've ever asked you this, Priscilla, but, you know, looking back on your mom sharing that with you, do you think she was looking to somehow affirm your abortion? You know, somehow, you know, it was supposed to
Mhm.
console you that it wasn't that big of a deal. Like, hey, I've done it, you did it. What's the problem?
Well, I think that might have been, you know, I might have been part of her motivation because my older sister had just also had an abortion. And so that was knowledge. And so there was this little club, you know, you know, her two daughters that went to college, you know, you know, got a little bit crazy in the late 60s. But that could have been part of it, Melissa. I think also, you know, just the burden she carried for years, you know. I mean, maybe she felt she could safely, yeah, say something and not be judged, but be somehow, yeah, it's okay. I did it too.
I mean, that's huge. Of maybe it wasn't to
Mhm.
affirm the abortion that they were coercing you to have, but maybe it was her, you know, her somewhat absolving herself of like, ooh, yeah, now that that's happened in your life, I can tell you what I did.
Right, right, right. Yes, yes. So you know, that was helpful for me to know in any case. But my behavior, you know, I just kind of didn't come out of that identity at all at that point. So this abortion narrative is, uh, you know, the unborn aren't human, they're not valued, and they have no rights. Those are the three biggies. And so I carried that, and I think the all of it affected me and my behavior and my choices. I was pregnant again at 25. That was after Roe versus Wade. So that was another ended in another abortion, this time heavily influenced by my boyfriend who and again, I didn't really want to go there because I guess internally, instinctively, I didn't, but it was different in that it was a local anesthetic this time, not a general. And it was the experience of that just flipped me out because it was so devastating and horrific. And I felt so angry that I wasn't prepared for the power of that experience in a very devastating way, I mean. And so,
You saw a
uh,
lot, you felt a lot, you heard a lot.
mm, and I realize now, Melissa, now that God's given me a renewed mind and through his scriptures and just healing, that the horror of that wasn't the reality that my baby's life was being taken in that moment, I think was what horrified me the most. And I'm so thankful to have that tender place in my heart that I can recognize that, because that's the reality of what abortion is. It's doesn't set us free, it doesn't. It brings us into further captivity. um so I was in a tough place. I didn't realize where I was, but I continued marching on. My boyfriend at the time knew people that owned a clinic in San Francisco where I lived, and they did abortions at this women's clinic. So I flipped from having this horrific experience, feeling so alone and so devastated that and ill prepared, that I went into this women's clinic who supposedly framed the whole experience as, we care about you. We're going to educate you about what's going to happen today. We're going to be there for you. We're going to walk you through the whole process, through the recovery, and then your follow-up appointments and all this. So they couched it in a advocacy role, but more like, oh, it's an inconvenience. It's, your body, your choice. So it's all of those other narratives that are part of that the lies, basically, that it's your body, your choice, it's your future. It's no big deal. It's just a simple procedure. We'll be there, and on and on. So that was where I went after the second abortion, was into the abortion industry, working at this private clinic for 3 years in San Francisco.
And essentially, I mean, was the narrative in your head, hey, you know what? I can be there for women in a way that no one was there for me at the clinic.
Yeah, exactly. Because in that abortion that I had the second time, it was a private doctor. My boyfriend was in the recovery, out in the waiting room waiting for me. There was a nurse in the room that was across the way. No, it was like, and there was nobody, nobody talked to me the whole time. It was a very lonely and awful experience. So as it is, no matter who's standing over you holding your hand, you still are going through that horrible experience, by yourself. Nobody can journey through that except for you. But I think the fact that this was padded with these other people that had compassion for you as a woman making this decision that you had a right to make now because Roe v. Wade was in place. Um, so yes, you're right. That's pretty much, I think, what attracted me to it was, oh, I can I can do this. I can be their advocate, But what I was advocating for was just, excuse me, the continued set of lies that, the women have a right to choose. And I guess I fell in line with the right given by the federal government, so it must be okay. So
And that was, I mean, we all know the impact of that over nearly 50 years of Roe, that it deceived the entire public and systems, right? Medical systems and other
mhm,
professionals that, yeah, I mean, it all must be okay. And it's been an insidious impact in terms of various, associations and things like that, really this became entrenched in our society. And so you were just one of the, right, tens of millions of people who
Yes.
were impacted by the lies. How did you get to the place that you're in today? I mean, I know parts of the story, but for people who aren't aware, how do you go from, being an abortion survivor, having two abortions, working in an abortion clinic, to now being a follower of Christ and a champion of truth in our society?
Mhm. Well, thank you for asking that because that's very important. As you know, I have shared that in my healing process through my own abortions. One of the groups out of a church in California that I went to had healing prayer, and um, for 3 hours, they prayed over me at the very end of this. And I actually had a vision at that time that took me into the womb that was, hard to describe because, it was something that God showed me. But I had a vision of his hand over my body. But I also had the horror of my twin being taken. So there was that dual thing going on there. And I think that hand that protected me there was protecting me through this wild time in my life. So in San Francisco, I was working at this abortion clinic, and the turning point in my life was God really intervening, I believe, to get my attention. And sometimes he has to do dramatic things. And in this case, I was in a near fatal car accident in San Francisco, and there was no other injuries because I was pulling out and a car hit me broadside, and I immediately flew to the floor of the car. Um, and in that experience, I had an out of body experience. I saw myself on the floor. I saw myself reaching desperately for life because I knew I was dying. And in that desperation of an agony of my soul, I saw a man outside the window of the car who was calm. And he just looked at me and said, "You're going to be okay." And then I woke up hours later in the hospital. They had to get the jaws of life to get me out of there. So it was serious. I broke my neck and had months of recovery. Um, but I went back to work at the abortion clinic. And during that period, there was something going on. And I think it was just a touch again by God to redirect my mind in my life, to wake me up a little bit, right? So I started to question everything I was doing. I didn't take action at that time, but I was definitely affected in my thoughts and in my mind and my soul. And I wanted truth. Wanted truth. I became a seeker of truth. So that took me to graduate school, and from there I went to rural Alaska to finish my graduate school program through an internship. And it was in rural Alaska that things started to really open up, and my spirit became more open. And again, God was pulling me out of this really identity I had with abortion for so long, and He was gently pulling me out of that. And I was around this beautiful environment, and He created the earth, and in that is just extreme beauty. And in San Francisco, I didn't. There are parts of the city that are just magnificent, but in rural Alaska in the summertime, you just can't get more beautiful than that. Well, you probably can. People would argue about that, but for me, I think my spirit just became very open, and I had Christian friends for the first time that were just that witness, right, of the Holy Spirit that they loved me, they befriended me. I don't know if they were praying for me, but my behaviors didn't change. I was still, hadn't been in that personal contact with the love of God, but so I got pregnant again, um, out of wedlock. And so I was faced again with, okay, what am I going to do? And at this point, I had nobody in my world that was influencing me to have an abortion. So I was thankful for that because there was nobody that was going to tell me to do that again. So I think that car accident was really the big turning point in my life. And then the second thing was having my son. That was, I made a choice for life. And I think that is just what broke through this, years of being in this deceptive place, this lie, this thief, this stealer of joy, the stealer of life. I was held captive by that for so long. And when I had my son, that was when the lock to that captivity became unlocked. And then in 4 months after that, I surrendered my life to Christ. And that was when the door was open and I was set free from that captivity that abortion had over me for so many years.
Yeah, it's like you
So
broke the
that
generational curse, right?
exactly, yes, yes. And I think that was so important to keep in mind was we're born into these situations where lies have been held, and in this case abortion was the lie that held me captive. And yes, it was generational. I mean, I I have a lot of sisters, and we've pretty much all been impacted by this except for one. So it's not something that is an untruth, you know.
Well, and I
So,
I am so struck by, and I think other people listening will be as well. Women are told the lie that abortion is the quote unquote solution to whatever their problem is, and that somehow that is what is going to change their future trajectory.
mhm,
And you lived with a very different truth, which was abortion nearly took your life, took the
mhm.
lives of lots of people around you through the abortion clinics, took the lives of your two children,
My two children, yes.
and right held you down. I mean, the enemy loves, I have no doubt, the enemy loves abortion because it, you know, takes away the image of God time and time again, and then it holds people captive. And so abortion did not set you free. The thing that set you free was choosing life.
Yes. Yes. And then surrendering to the love that God had always had for me and recognizing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
choosing life brought you closer to God, allowed you to see God's handprints on your life
Yes.
the whole time. And again, I hope that people listening and watching take this away from this because it is such a lie from the pit of hell that abortion is this saving, necessary thing. Your experience is the truth.
Yeah. Exactly. Yes.
And people can be
Yes.
set free. That is the
Yeah.
good news. And so,
Yeah.
let's, in the last few minutes, Priscilla, let's talk about what healing has looked like for you because I know it's
Yeah.
not easy. And for you,
Mhm.
with multiple experiences with abortion, your healing has had to be a little bit different than other people's. But again, you're a great inspiration and example of, man, do the hard work. It's worth it.
Mhm. I agree. And I'm thankful to the Abortion Survivors Network, you, Melissa, because I had gone through healing for my own abortions, and I went through that in the mid 90s. And then again, I went through Forgiven and Set Free with a friend of mine to just kind of, go through it again just not too long ago, 2 or 3 years ago. So, um, so that's been helpful to find forgiveness through that because and I wrote letters to the fathers of both my babies and wrote letters to my babies, and it's healing to recognize that. And then the couple of things. First of all, the Abortion Survivors Network took me back into the womb to find forgiveness and healing in that process, to be able to forgive my mother, um, and recognize the value that my life has, because I think I carried that for so many years, and the humanity of life. And I think that's one of the lies that you carry, is that you're not human. You're not worth that, value as a human being, because, you were tried to, somebody tried to end your life. So it's hard to get through that because it's sometimes very personal. But your book, The Survivor's Guide to Healing, was, I think that's what it's called. I haven't picked it up in a while.
Yeah,
In
more
a
than a
while.
choice.
Yeah, yes, we're more than a choice. I think that was extremely, very, very helpful to journal through all of those chapters. And I love helping other survivors with that, in as they need. So that was part of it. But the other thing I wanted to share with you, which was new to me, was I went through, at the prompting of our state Project Rachel director, to go through the healing through Project Rachel, to memorialize and mourn the loss of my twin. And I had never even thought about doing that until she had suggested it just probably less than a year ago. So I went through that recently, and it was so wonderful for me, because I did a talk in Alaska recently, and I was actually able to talk about my twin and incorporate his life in my talk, which I had not done before. So that was extremely helpful to me. And, the other very helpful thing was, and then there were none, which is the ministry for people that have worked in the industry, in the abortion industry. So I joined them at your request. I'm so glad I did. I went through their healing program as well, and am still part of that ministry, and part of ASN. And I just am very, very grateful for the support that there is out there for women to get healed. And there's a lot of post-abortion healing programs out there. So, uh, choose which one you want. But Project Rachel is a beautiful program. It's very intentional. um, I'm not a Catholic, but they accepted me nevertheless, and I went through uh, all of those steps, and it was just extremely helpful for me.
Grateful for you that you walked through that because, you know, you know this as well as I do, and I'm grateful for how much you give of your time and your talent to give back to multiple groups, including our survivors around the world, who
Yeah,
gather together. But you know how much abortion survival is unique from person to person, but yet how similar it is for all of us, no matter what type of
mhm.
procedure it was, what gestation, right, whether it was legal, illegal. And one of those factors that is present for so many twin survivors in particular is the guilt, right? The guilt of surviving when your twin didn't, and
Yeah.
finding ways to honor them with your life is
Mhm.
such a healthy thing. Being able to acknowledge that they are a part of your experience as well, because
Yeah.
every life is a gift. But I know that it's very complicated when you are the one who survives as opposed to the person who didn't.
Yes, I was so thankful for that suggestion, um, because it really brought that life. into my heart, and and it allows me to share it in a way because you know what, his life was no less valuable than mine, you know. And so it just kind of magnifies the, you know, the injustice really of abortion and um, the, you know, how come I survived? I kind of just lay that at the feet of the Lord because I don't have an explanation for that. But I know that when I get on the other side of things, that there'll be somebody there who I'll recognize. Um, but I, you know, and I think to just remind people that there is a very, and I can say evil abortion advocacy narrative out there that has been, you know, from the beginning of time, really, you know, but has just gotten so pervasive throughout the world. And uh, the only way to counter that is to get in touch with an advocacy narrative for life, which is based on truth. That's the foundation of it. And it's the truth, it's compassion, it's meeting people where they are and really working to just share our stories like we're doing today and hopefully it'll impact somebody. You know, I was rereading sort of the text of what you wanted to talk about, and you know, as far as how my life has impacted the world, I think were the words you use. I was like, you know, I've never really seen my life as, you know, a set of accomplishments. I I don't look at it that way. But what I do hope is that I can make an impact on people through the love that God has given me in my heart and for people. I do love people. I love being able to encourage others. And I suppose that, you know, Melissa, when we get on the other side of things through the veil, that, you know, the ways that we have impacted others will, I don't know if they'll be revealed to us or not, but that's kind of where I'm putting my faith and how I live my life now. I'm blessed to have three children. I did marry the father of my son. We had two other children, beautiful daughters, and the marriage didn't last. So it didn't have the right foundation, and so it ended. But um, I raised my children. I have three wonderful kids and 11 grandchildren, and now four great grandchildren. So life goes
A
on. Life
generational
goes on.
impact for life.
Impact for life, right? And I think, you know, I will sit in that place of, Lord, I don't know if you saved me for myself in my life, but I have these grandchildren, I have these children. And that is the legacy because when you have, I don't know if people really understand that when yeah, I mean, those of us that are on the side of life do understand that when abortion is kids are killed in the womb, that is not just their life, it's a generation of, you know. So I look at that and my I think my most of my older grandchildren are aware of my story, so I hope that it places in their hearts a sense of God's provision for them too.
Yeah, you ended the generational curse and you started a new pattern in your family, which is
Mhm.
about the beauty of life and the gift of healing and of Christ. And, you know, that's the greatest key takeaway I think we can end on in this conversation for people
Yeah,
watching and listening, which is every single
absolutely.
one of us can live a life like yours, Priscilla, no matter what they've gone through, right? This is where the hope comes from, is from Christ and knowing the transformations that happen in our own lives. And then therefore we get to be an instrument of in our families and in the world. So thank you again for joining me. Thank you for
Mhm.
your honesty, your vulnerability, and for being an example of the fact that healing is never a finished process. I don't say that to scare people. There's something really beautiful about the fact that God is never done.
He isn't, and I'm just grateful he brought me out of that very, very dark place into the light and the light of his love. And Jesus saves, right? That's why he came, to save us from the world. So, yeah,
For
yeah.
anybody listening, right? For you, the audience, I hope that you take Priscilla and my conversation to heart, that you may not be able to relate to her experiences or mine, but whatever it is you are going through, there is always hope. There is always a new day. And be sure to share this episode with other people who need to know the truth about abortion and ultimately lead more people to healing and to purpose in their own families and in our world. Thank you for tuning in for this episode of Life Beyond Abortion.
Life Beyond Abortion is a podcast presentation of the Herzog Foundation. The views and opinions on the show are those of the host and her guest, and not necessarily those of the Herzog Foundation. You can find out more about Melissa's work at melissaohden.com or by following her on Instagram at melissaohden. Be sure to like and subscribe to the show so that you never miss an episode of Life Beyond Abortion.